Welcome, Johanna.
Thanks for having me, Dev.
Thank you for coming to our lovely series called For Purpose Podcast. And in the For Purpose series, we are inviting leaders who are driving for purpose organizations and leaders driven by a purpose. And in this series, we are talking around the purpose, the individual and the organizational purpose, and how it has evolved across their work life. And before we go into specific questions, I would like you to talk about your background, your brief experience, and your learnings, and how you feel that your purpose has evolved and belief systems have changed across life.
I think the best way to sum up my background is that when I was younger, I was very ambitious. I was in uni and I thought I knew what my career path would be. I'd go into the private sector, do lots of crazy things, good things, big things. And then my life took a different pathway. I fell into the disability sector. I left the sector briefly, and that's when I realised that I'd also fallen in love with the sector. I was very privileged in that in my career I've had lots of different roles, and all the roles that I've enjoyed the most are those that allow me to spend time with people, and spending time with people and hearing about them and their life that has really shaped who I am today. And there is so much, I really do believe that everyone has something, or I can learn from anybody that I come across. And I think in terms of shaping my career, shaping the way that I view the world these days, working in this sector has profoundly impacted who I am, how I see the world, and the things that I'm passionate about. Like I said, I didn't realise that I'd fallen in love with the sector until I left. And then I came back, and I was only going to be back for, 3 months, and turned into 8 years. And just the thing that resonates with me the most is really strong understanding that people are people. Oftentimes you have different conversations, and the language is along the lines of, people with disability are this cohort over here. We need to make things accessible. We need to be extra mindful to be inclusive. We need to, tick some boxes, all of that kind of stuff. When the reality is, and one of the first lessons that I ever learned in the sector was that there isn't that difference. People are people, and something could happen today, tomorrow, and then I'm part of that cohort. I might need NDIS funding or someone that I really deeply care about. And just as people are rich and complex, so are people that happen to live with disability. But it makes it interesting. There's no 2 days that are the same.
And just to extend that thought, what you talked about, that in any day I will be a person, I might live a life of a person with disability. Something can happen to me. And if you don't have anything, if you don't have any accident, but still there are boxes of people with disabilities and people without, or able-bodied, as they call it. It's just, as you grow old, you'll have functional impairments. You'll not be able to feed yourself. You'll not be able to walk around. You'll have somebody taking care of you. And that's some form of disability. So everybody will have some form of functional impairments or disability. It's just a matter of time. So everybody's in the same box.
Yes, absolutely. A very simple demonstration of that. I was presenting to the executive management team at City of Melville many years ago about employment issues for people with disability, and encouraging the council to offer more employment opportunities. And I believe he was a CEO. As I said, it was quite a number of years ago now, but I think he was a CEO. He got up after we had concluded our presentation, and he just removed his glasses. That was his demonstration of that if he doesn't have his glasses, he's also impaired. And when you look at such simple examples, exactly what you're saying, the difference actually isn't as much as someone like me thought before I worked in the sector.
Very powerful. And could you talk a bit more on your initial interactions with people before the disability, around your education and before your family, as in what defined your beliefs and values?
There were people living with disability in my life before I started working in the sector, but growing up, I don't ever recall there being a separation. Quite close family, friends of ours, one of their children had a significant deteriorating disability. And to me, he was just my friend's brother. I never really looked, differently at that. And although I didn't probably have such a firm view at the time that people are people, I don't believe that I don't remember growing up in any way to have views that, these people are kind of in this category and those people are in a different category. I'm born in Finland, raised in Australia, kind of raised in Germany, brought back to Australia. I think I'm kind of privileged in the way that I've come across lots of different people in my life. People from all different types of walks of life, different worldviews. And I'm grateful for that, because saying, exactly what I was saying about being in the sector, I think it's added a real richness to my life for which I'm grateful. It's, I find myself privileged when people start sharing their story with me, or when they give me an insight into what their experience or what their life is or who they are. Not everybody does that. And when you're in that moment, you have somebody opening up, I do think that that's a privilege. Some of my early interactions in the sector with people living with disability, all sorts of different ones, I had to cover some of my colleagues' shifts when they were supporting people who were working at UWA Business School, and they were working in administrative capacities, and I didn't have any kind of training or anything to help me up. So I think being thrown into the deep end and then just trying to look at the situation and do my job, which, for example, in that moment was to support these people to do their work. It really made me have to sit back, observe, and kind of be guided by them. And then when you're sitting around, you're having chit chat, and they tell you, what they get up to and this and that. It's they all of those moments are the highlights of my career. You can ask any of my staff if they let me attend our end of year functions with the clients or any of the Halloweens or Easters or whatever, they will tell you that it's like actually I'm not going to use an analogy, but it's, I get let out of my little office box and it is like just the best time, getting up on the dance floor, dancing with the clients and mixing and mingling. It's
not the Finnish Prime Minister.
I am not the Finnish Prime Minister, but I also don't believe that there's anything wrong with enjoying life every once in a while. Sure. But like those moments, they are
very powerful.
Yeah, they bring me back to my purpose. I don't do this job for any other reason other than I want to see good outcomes for the people that we support and for my staff, for my management team. And like I said, if one day we could get to a point where the community has shifted their view on people with disability and have this common view that people are people. We don't always have to label and categorize.
We end up having categories for everybody. For example, I fit in a CALD box. So does you, because you speak other languages. So in theory, you are CALD and I'm also CALD. If you have to distill your conversations and then learnings across life into few lines to define, a purpose or a value, what would that be?
Can you rephrase that? Because I probably don't think of things in that language. Yes.
So if you want to, convert all of that learnings, or if you have to define your purpose or your values or beliefs in few lines, how would you do that?
I firmly believe that people are people, and they need to be seen as whole individuals. I see that principle in so many popular language at the moment. If you're on LinkedIn, there's more and more content about people bringing their whole selves to work, as opposed to, you know, maybe a decade or so ago where it was, you know, you leave your personal stuff at the door. We're whole human beings. We're not robots that flick switches on and off.
Yeah.
And I just think that if you can see someone as another human being, that's a starting point for a connection. And if you have a starting point for a connection, you can find a way to work and, you know, hopefully progress, shared interests. Other values that I have, I think a lot of them really boil down to that. It's about people and how people should be treated. You know, the thing that I think really kicked off my passion for the sector or in the sector was one of my first roles. I got thrown into the deep end and I was responsible for our quality assurance, which all of the standards, they're built on human rights. And obviously Australia's commitment to the United Nations Convention. So when you're getting involved in that work and understanding human rights and then looking at people's experiences, I think that's where really my passion has come from throughout, you know, the 10 or so years that I've been in the sector. So I really probably have that one lens, but I think that one lens
covers it all.
When you apply it, it's short and sweet. It brings me back to kind of like a central place. Yeah.
Have you felt conflicted in the work you have done in the last 10 plus years in situations and scenarios where you feel misaligned with your values and what you are doing or with the people you are engaging? And talk about a scenario that happened, if there is, and what do you do?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I don't say this in any kind of disrespectful way to people who make the decisions, but I think there's a lot of improvement to be made in the policy frameworks that establish the industry that we work in. I don't think that it really works for everyone that it was meant to work for. I saw that, as I said, I worked in the sector in a disability employment service program. That was kind of the main area that I started in the sector. And that program was really, because I worked on the quality assurance side and also in the business development side, there I saw a lot of conflict because you've got, at the time it was the National Standards for Disability Services, and they were based on the human rights. You know, what do people want? They should have choice, they should have control, etc., etc. And then you've got this funding model that is really about moving people into boxes. You know, this person, yep, sure, they want to be an accountant one day, but their funding, you know, the way the funding structured means that for the organisation to receive funding, this person actually just needs to do an 8-hour-a-week job. Here's a vacancy, let's put that person there. And that person really, you know, if they got a job at, you know, in a horticultural program when their ambition was to be an accountant, are they really, is that a meaningful employment outcome? Is it going to be sustainable if that person's not fulfilled in their employment? I really saw a lot of conflict, and I did leave the sector for a little while. And like I said, I ended up coming back. In the role that I have now, I am concerned about the policy frameworks pushing disability service organisations to have to spend a lot of time considering their sustainability more so than the quality of the outcomes. And compared to many other providers in the sector, we are a smaller organisation. And the impact over the last couple of years throughout COVID, transitioning into the NDIS, changes in regulations, all the stuff all the CEOs talk about all the time, it has had a significant impact. We do have to talk about sustainability because we do want to be here. We want to make sure, as CEO, I want to make sure my clients are going to be supported. I want to make sure my staff have work. You know, I have no intention of turning around to them and saying, hey, sorry, can't, provide you your supports anymore. I'm sorry you don't have a job anymore. I'm sorry you're not going to be able to, provide for yourself, your family. I don't want to do that. That's not an outcome that, I'm prepared to accept. So that means that I do have to do my due diligence with the board and look at our sustainability. But is that really why I work in the sector? No. I work in the sector because the outcomes that I want to see, and my board feel the same, my management team feel the same, my staff would all feel the same. So there is that conflict there. But like I said earlier, I think there's some reassurance to be felt from the fact that, we did have that disability assembly, and I keep going back to that as an example because when I left that event, I felt very positive about the momentum within the sector of how there are very capable, intelligent people who feel passionately and who can probably make stuff happen to fix, the areas in which the policy frameworks just aren't really working. Yeah. They're not working for the sustainability of the sector. There's conversations about market failure in certain areas. And they're not really delivering on the outcomes for people with disability.
Again, the old question of if you focus on sustainability or growing the organizations from not the normal standard means of receiving funding from the government or identifying other commercial opportunities, you might sustain for a longer term and then do good and keep on delivering the good if, traditionally the funding is not sustainable. So are you thinking of being on a path of identifying for-profit commercial opportunities or commercial opportunities which will sustain the doing good of the organization?
I'm reluctant to comment on that too much because we're just about to go into our strategic planning period. And I don't want to say something that my directors will disagree with. Because of the volatility that comes with being an NDIS only funded organisation, we do have to look at how we build that stability in the organisation, whether that's, through other commercial operations, other forms of funding, growth, whatever it might be. I'm not sure at this particular stage. It's definitely something, because there's an alignment that we need to keep. We are a values-based organisation, and maintaining our integrity to who we are, why we're doing what we're doing. We need to be pretty clear on the other opportunities that we seek. If we see an opportunity within the markets to go, oh, hey, look, if we go here, yeah, sure, we're going to make a killing. It's going to support us.
For sure, you will not be going into property investments or share trading. For sure, you will not go there. But, things which are more value aligned, things which are more social enterprise, but focusing on your human services sector, what you are. So those are the angles might be of value.
Yes, and definitely being another thing that I've reflected on a lot, particularly in the last 12 months, longer, but, COVID interrupted some of this. There's so much talk in the sector about quality supports. It's such a hot term. There's all the standards and it's all about quality.
Clinical governance?
Clinical
governance frameworks?
What does that word mean? If I talk about high quality supports, what's the measuring tool for that? It's not the quality and safeguarding framework.
No.
The quality and safeguarding framework is a benchmark. That's not the determinant of high quality supports. So I go back to what I would like to see and what I would like to do is have the people for whom we do all the roles that we do, have them be the ones to say, this is what would make a difference. So in terms of exploring any strategic movement within the organisation, I do believe it has to be informed again by those people, what their feedback is. I think when we were, with campaigns like Every Australian Counts, there was language used that not doing things for us without us or nothing for us without it. There was some kind of language along those lines. If you think about that, then we need to move away from someone like me who doesn't have lived experience making all these sorts of decisions about what someone with lived experience, what will deliver them the outcomes that they want in their life. It's not an easy answer. And I know that I'm not directly answering your questions, but I think when I look at the work that needs to be done these are the things that I'm looking to achieve in the best way that I can. Obviously, there's resource constraints, etc., etc. But before I make a decision, I want to have thought and considered all of these things. How, to what extent in making these decisions can I make sure that the people who I'm looking to make this decision for, that I've actually included them in the decision making, taken their voice into consideration rather than just made a whole bunch of conclusions myself.
Perfect. And then we talk about the holistic purpose of the sector, why NDIS came into play, and the whole delivery mechanism and giving the power back to the individual, giving the control into the individual's hands so that they can, be the consumer rather than be the receiver of services. How do you think that the values or the purpose plays? So the sector created for a purpose, and that purpose and that interaction with individual organizations who are there for a purpose to deliver, and then providers who are delivering different sets of services to the same person, and the interaction of multi-layered of purpose, how does that plays?
I think the NDIS had all of the right intentions. From a human rights perspective, it should be the person with disability who's receiving the funding. I think the NDIS had all of the right intentions in terms of the person with disability being able to and being supported to exercise choice and control. For whatever political reasons, I don't think that that's exactly what has transpired for everyone who receives NDIS funding. I think some of it goes back to historical issues where substitute decision making was a fairly accepted norm. We still see a lot of that as opposed to supported decision making. So I definitely think that there's room for improvement. But again, I do feel some reassurance from the fact that when I look around the sector, I think that my colleagues see it similarly, where we do want to see that shift, that the person with disability is the one who makes the decisions. There's some really amazing work being done around helping to educate substitute decision makers and people with disability, for example, about supported decision making. That's kind of change takes time. And I think as time goes on, people build those skills, they build their understanding. I think purposes will become more aligned.
Perfect.
There is a small part of the market where obviously you see, if you look at the number of organisations, people who are receiving NDIS funding, there has been, I do think some of the speculation and commentary around people seeing the NDIS as a bit of a commercial opportunity. I think some of that dialogue is very valid. I'd like to believe, though, that the number of purpose-focused organisations and the strength of people who are very clear on the purpose and the intention and the outcomes that the NDIS is meant to be delivering, that outweighs anybody and any other organisation who sees it as a commercial opportunity. And so I think we've got a relatively new government and the new minister is talking fairly frankly about his commitment and the new government's commitment to fixing the NDIS or making positive changes to the NDIS, bringing it back into alignment with what it was intended to deliver. So I'm looking forward to and feeling slightly optimistic that we will see some positive movement. And if we see the positive movement, those purposes across the industry, across different hierarchies, we should be able to bring them into a relatively good alignment.
Perfect. And before we close, the last one I want you to conclude on by talking about somebody in your life, a family member or somebody in your life who has impacted your purpose, which is people are people, which we have established, which is a good one. Who has impacted your life, a book, a person, just to talk about?
Can I just say, as someone who believes that I can learn from everybody, it's really hard to pinpoint one individual person. I really do mean it when I say that I feel privileged when people share with me. If they're sharing with me in a personal capacity, in a professional capacity, sharing their energy, I really do believe that I'm privileged to be in those moments, and I really do see them all as personal, professional, whatever kind of development, learning, whatever you want to say. When you ask me that question, I see a number of faces go through my head, and I think I couldn't pinpoint just one person. I'm sorry.
That's fine. We have agreed that your purpose is people are people, which is very powerful, and which is a culmination of multiple people coming in your life and so many experiences in life giving you, and you being privileged, as you say.
I do think so.
Yep, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the conversation.
Likewise.